Remove the bumper. Remove the trim.
You may need to wiggle the trim to remove it.
Remove the rivets. Pry up the center of the rivet first. This will unlock it. Next, pry up the base of the fastener.
The steps needed to access the other side are the same as this side.
Lift the panel to remove it. Remove the rivets. Pry up the center of the rivet first. This will unlock it. Next, pry up the base of the fastener. Lift the panel to remove it.
Okay, so we have those two side panels off. Now we have a few bolts we're going to take off. There's four Torx bolts here in the front.
Remove the rivets. Pry up the center of the rivet first. This will unlock it. Next, pry up the base of the fastener.
Turn the wheel to give yourself better access to the lining.
Remove the bolts by turning them counterclockwise. Remove the wheel well lining.
And then if we look, there's going to be two vertical bolts. There's one here, and then if you look back, there's one that's like a little bit deeper.
Remove the bolts by turning them counterclockwise.
Turn the wheel to give yourself better access to the lining.
Remove the bolts by turning them counterclockwise.
The wheel well lining can be pretty rigid and sometimes sharp, so it's a good idea to have a pair of gloves before attempting this repair.
Remove the bolts by turning them counterclockwise.
Now, the last step we're going to do is basically it's right along the front of the car. If you look here, you're going to find 6 bolts and 6 fasteners that you have to take out that connect the bumper underneath the vehicle.
Remove the rivets. Pry up the center of the rivet first. This will unlock it. Next, pry up the base of the fastener. Remove the bolts by turning them counterclockwise.
Remove the remaining rivets. Remove the remaining bolts.
Bolt the wheel wells and underneath off. Now we can start taking the bumper off. What you want to do is come to one side here, either or, and we're going to grab, and you want to kind of pull down, and then once you kind of pull down a little bit, just pull out. So kind of pull down and then out like that, and you'll see it'll kind of come loose like that, and then we'll just kind of leave that and go do the other side. So we've got the other side off here. Now we're going to remove this side. We're going to do the same thing, pull down and kind of out. So pull down and then out, and you can see we got that loose now. And then after we have both sides off like that, we're going to have to come to the front, and you do have to kind of lift up on the front part to kind of get the rest of the bumper off. So now we have both sides of the bumper kind of near the wheel well disengaged, and then what we're going to want to do here is we're going to come to the front of the car, and there's a couple pins that kind of go down into the car here, so you have to kind of lift up on this section in the middle as you kind of pull out. You can see it kind of gets loose there and just kind of pull out, and then you may have to kind of come to the side here and kind of give it a little extra, little oomph there. Kind of get that off, and then you might have to kind of do the same thing on this side too. Just give it a little extra oomph here. It looks like there's kind of a pin there that can kind of get caught up. Now, don't pull on this too hard because there is a cable connected right in the middle here that you're going to want to disconnect.
Pry up the tab and pull the connector to release. Considering the amount of effort required to access the bulb assembly, we recommend replacing both sides at once.
So once we have the cable kind of in the middle here disconnected, you'll see this can kind of go down and just sit on the ground. Now, if you do have fog lights, be aware that those are going to be connected on both sides here. Also, we have some wiring that's connected right here, so don't pull on it too hard. If you want to disconnect this wiring, you can, but if you basically just kind of set the bumper on the floor like this, you're going to have access to all the bolts to get the headlight housing out, as well as enough room to pull the headlight housing out here. So now we're going to lift the bumper back up and get it in position. So first thing I'm going to do is lift it up and reconnect the connector here. Once you connect this, just don't drop it because it's going to put too much pressure on the wiring. So after you have the connector plugged in, if you look, there's kind of these sections here. And basically, this section goes on like a little tab that's underneath here. Now, it's a little finicky here, so there's really no good way to do this, but you've got to make sure that that gets on there, otherwise this isn't going to go on properly. So again, if you're having trouble, chances are that tab's not really lining up there for you, okay? But once you kind of get that into position here, you should be good to go to patch the rest of this up. So kind of now that we have the front portion of the grille and bumper kind of in place, we can kind of just come over to the side here and kind of push this side back in. Now you're gonna have to kind of push it into the lights there, and then it kind of sits like up into here. Now if it doesn't line up like perfectly for you, that's okay, because when you go to put these bolts back in, it'll kind of help get it into place there. So you can see how it's in place there, but kind of when I let go, it kind of comes down a little bit. That's fine. When we go to put those bolts back up in there, it'll kind of cinch it up for you. Now we're just going to come over to the other side and kind of do the same thing we did on the other side. Kind of push this back into place and then just kind of get this all lined up and ready for those bolts to go back in.
Replace the rivets. Align the base of the rivet first. Next, push down on the center to lock it in place. Replace the Torx bolts by turning them clockwise.
It's a good idea to hand tighten the bolts before securing them to the vehicle.
Replace the bolts by turning them clockwise. Replace the rivets. Align the base of the rivet first. Next, push down on the center to lock it in place. Replace the bolts by turning them clockwise. Replace the rivets. Align the base of the rivet first. Next, push down on the center to lock it in place. Replace the bolts by turning them clockwise. Replace the wheel well lining. Tuck the lining behind the lip of the bumper. Replace the bolts by turning them clockwise.
Turn the wheel to give yourself better access to the lining.
Replace the bolts by turning them clockwise.
We recommend wearing gloves when changing your lights. The oils on your fingers can create hot spots and cause the bulb to burn out prematurely.
Replace the wheel well lining. Tuck the lining behind the lip of the bumper. Replace the bolts by turning them clockwise. Align the panel with the body before securing it to the vehicle. It's important to make sure it's set properly, otherwise it won't attach correctly. Replace the rivets. Align the base of the rivet first. Next, push down on the center to lock it in place. Align the panel with the body before securing it to the vehicle. It's important to make sure it's set properly, otherwise it won't attach correctly. Replace the rivets. Align the base of the rivet first. Next, push down on the center to lock it in place.
Now when you go to bring this trim back in, my suggestion, because if you look, it kind of goes in a little bit on both sides here. So my suggestion is kind of like get it lined up first to make sure that it's all good. And then we're kind of just going to push it down onto the ridge here.
Align the trim and secure it to the vehicle.
Make sure the assembly is tight and secure.